Welcome, wanderers of the night, to Petra's Dark and Dreamy, where shadows dance and dreams drift through the twilight. I'm Petra, your guide through this realm where the boundaries of reality blur and the mystical becomes tangible. Tonight, we plunge into the depths of the unknown, exploring stories that shimmer in the darkness and ideas that echo through the silence. So, find a cozy nook. Let the world outside fade away and prepare to embark on a journey where the night is always young and the dreams are endlessly alluring. Are you ready to embrace the dark and dreamy? Then let's begin. Perchta is a fascinating figure from European folklore, particularly in alpine regions of Austria, Bavaria, and Switzerland, where she is known as a winter goddess or spirit. She is often described as a dual-natured being. One side is that of a protector of the home and children, while the other is fearsome and punishing, especially to those who have been lazy, greedy, or who do not respect certain customs. This story captures the essence of Perchta, a goddess who, while terrifying, also provides an opportunity for growth and redemption, teaching lessons about diligence, respect, and the importance of tradition. The Snow Queen's Vigil. Once upon a time, in a small alpine village nestled deep in the mountains, there was a hardworking, kind-hearted woman named Alma. Every year when the harsh winter winds began to howl and the first snowflakes of the season dusted the rooftops, Alma would prepare for the coming of the long, dark nights. She would gather firewood, weave blankets, and ensure that the hearth was always warm, for she knew that winter in the Alps was no easy season to endure. But there was something more that Alma did every winter. She kept the ancient tradition of honoring Perchta, the Winter Queen. Perchta was said to roam the snowy forests and mountain passes, keeping watch over the people of the land. On the nights of the full moon, particularly in the darkest months of winter, she would appear in the village, sometimes as a beautiful, radiant woman in white robes, and other times as a terrifying figure, with a beak-like nose and a belly swollen with 1,000 curses. Perchta was not a spirit to be feared, but to be respected. She was a guardian of order, truth, and diligence. Every year, Alma would leave an offering of bread, milk, and herbs near the edge of the village where the forest began. It was a tradition passed down from her mother and her grandmother before her. She believed that if Perchta was pleased with the offerings, the village would be spared from harsh misfortune. If not, however, Perchta would punish those who were lazy or unkind, sometimes by appearing in the form of a strange, haunting figure in the night. One especially bitter winter, when the snow fell relentlessly and the winds seemed to howl like wolves, a young man named Lucas moved into the village. Lucas was different from the villagers. He was lazy and disobedient, and he had little respect for tradition. He spent his days lounging by the fire, complaining about the cold, and his nights were filled with drunken revelry. He scoffed at the idea of offering food to the old spirits, thinking it to be superstition. "Why should I give anything to some ghost?" Lucas would say to anyone who cared to listen. "I'll survive just fine on my own." Alma heard these words one evening while she was passing by Lucas's house. She stopped and looked at him with a knowing gaze. "Take care, Lucas," she said gently. "Perchta does not forgive those who are lazy or disrespectful. You may think that you can survive without her, but the mountains are unforgiving to those who ignore their ways." Lucas laughed, brushing her off. "I don't believe in old tales, Alma. Perchta won't come for me." But that winter, the snow grew deeper and the nights grew colder. The villagers worked together, sharing food and firewood, keeping their homes warm and well guarded against the biting cold. Only Lucas remained in his house, refusing to help or participate in the traditions of the village. On the night of the full moon, Perchta appeared. The villagers saw her first in the distance, her form shining through the snow, walking toward the village like a beacon. Her hair was long and silver, and her eyes shone like the moon. She was dressed in a flowing gown made of white light, but even from a distance, there was something cold and unnerving about her presence. When she reached Lucas's house, she did not knock. Instead, she simply stood before it, her eyes piercing the darkness. Lucas, who had been sitting by his fire, heard the door creak open despite the lock, and when he looked up, he saw her, Perchta, standing in the doorway, her face half hidden by the shadows. You have been warned, Lucas. Your laziness and disrespect have angered me, she said in a voice that sounded like the wind itself. Lucas, terrified, scrambled to his feet, but his voice failed him. He had heard the old tales, but he never truly believed they were real. Perchta's gaze seemed to freeze the air around him. Your home is warm, she said, but your heart is cold, and your hands have not labored. You are no better than the wolves that stalk the mountain, taking what they want without giving back. Perchta raised her hand, and the room seemed to darken. Suddenly, Lucas felt his limbs grow heavy, as though the weight of the entire mountain was pressing down on him. You must learn the lesson of winter, Perchta intoned. Cold comes for us all, but it is only through work, respect, and kindness that we can endure. With that, she vanished into the snow. The next morning, Lucas awoke to find that the cold had seeped into his very bones. He felt an aching in his chest, as though the warmth had been drained from him. But there was more. Outside his door, on the ground, lay a bundle of twigs and herbs carefully arranged. It was as though Perchta had left him a gift, a reminder that even in the harshest winters, kindness and effort could warm the heart. From that day on, Lucas worked alongside the villagers. He mended his ways and began to take part in the traditions of the mountain. In time, his heart thawed, and the cold, both within and around him, lifted. But every winter, when the first snow fell and the winds howled through the mountain passes, Lucas would always leave a loaf of bread and a cup of milk near the edge of the forest to honor the Winter Queen, who had shown him the true meaning of the season. And so the village remained safe and warm, for Perchta, though feared, was not a spirit of cruelty. She was a spirit of balance, reminding the people of the importance of work, respect, and community, even in the coldest of winters. The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen. It was so terribly cold. Snow was falling, and it was almost dark. Evening came on, the last evening of the year. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl, bareheaded and barefoot, was walking through the streets. Of course, when she had left her house, she'd had her slippers on, but what good had they been? They were very big slippers, way too big for her, for they belonged to her mother. The little girl had lost them running across the road, where two carriages had rattled by terribly fast. One slipper she'd not been able to find again, and a boy had run off with the other, saying he could use it very well as a cradle someday when he had children of his own. And so the little girl walked on her naked feet, which were quite red and blue with the cold. In an old apron, she carried several packages of matches, and she held a box of them in her hand. No one had bought any from her all day long, and no one had given her a cent. Shivering with cold and hunger, she crept along, a picture of misery, poor little girl. The snowflakes fell on her long fair hair, which hung in pretty curls over her neck. In all the windows, lights were shining, and there was a wonderful smell of roast goose, for it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she thought of that. In a corner formed by two houses, one of which projected farther out into the street than the other, she sat down and drew up her little feet under her. She was getting colder and colder, but did not dare go home, for she had sold no matches nor earned a single cent, and her father would surely beat her. Besides, it was cold at home, for they had nothing over them but a roof through which the wind whistled, even though the biggest cracks had been stuffed with straw and rags. Her hands were almost dead with cold. Oh, how much one little match might warm her! If she could only take one from the box and rub it against the wall and warm her hands. She drew one out. Ratch! How it sputtered and burned. It made a warm, bright flame like a little candle as she held her hands over it. But it gave a strange light. It really seemed to the little girl as if she were sitting before a great iron stove with shining brass knobs and a brass cover. How wonderfully the fire burned. How comfortable it was. The youngster stretched out her feet to warm them too. Then the little flame went out. The stove vanished, and she had only the remains of the burnt match in her hand. She struck another match against the wall. It burned brightly, and when the light fell upon the wall, it became transparent, like a thin veil, and she could see through it into a room. On the table, a snow-white cloth was spread, and on it stood a shining dinner service. The roast goose steamed gloriously, stuffed with apples and prunes. And what was still better, the goose jumped down from the dish and waddled along the floor with a knife and fork in its breast, right over to the little girl. Then the match went out, and she could see only the thick, cold wall. She lighted another match. Then she was sitting under the most beautiful Christmas tree. It was much larger and much more beautiful than the one she had seen last Christmas through the glass door at the rich merchant's home. Thousands of candles burned on the green branches, and colored pictures like those in the print shops looked down at her. The little girl reached both her hands toward them. Then the match went out. But the Christmas lights mounted higher. She saw them now as bright stars in the sky. One of them fell down, forming a long line of fire. Now someone is dying, thought the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had loved her, and who was now dead, had told her that when a star fell down, a soul went up to God. She rubbed another match against the wall. It became bright again, and in the glow the old grandmother stood clear and shining, kind and lovely. "Grandmother," cried the child, "oh, take me with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burned out. You will vanish like the warm stove, the wonderful roast goose, and the beautiful big Christmas tree." And she quickly struck the whole bundle of matches, for she wished to keep her grandmother with her. And the matches burned with such a glow that it became brighter than daylight. Grandmother had never been so grand and beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms, and both of them flew in brightness and joy above the earth, very, very high. And up there was neither cold, nor hunger, nor fear. They were with God. But in the corner, leaning against the wall, sat the little girl with red cheeks and smiling mouth, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. The New Year's sun rose upon a little pathetic figure. The child sat there, stiff and cold, holding the matches, of which one bundle was almost burned. She wanted to warm herself, the people said. No one imagined what beautiful things she had seen, and how happily she had gone with her old grandmother into the bright new year. For our last holiday story, this one actually belongs with Christmas, but I saved the best for last. We will read The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it. which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit nearer to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry just to appreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit for saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly, with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" "You say your hair is gone?" he said with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Del," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string of paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy. And then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful, vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now I suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat, who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are the wisest. Everywhere they're the wisest. They are the Magi. Thank you for joining me tonight on Petra's Dark and Dreamy. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to show your support for the show. If you're one of the first 100 subscribers, you can request your favorite literature read by me, Petra. See you next time. Keep sleeping soundly. Keep sleeping soundly. Don't let me wake you. It's Petra. I'm stopping by to tell you why I use Buy Me a Coffee to connect with my audience and grow my podcast. As a podcaster, Buy Me a Coffee has been a game changer for me. It's the easiest way for my listeners to support the show directly, whether through one-time donations or monthly memberships. The best part is that I get to keep it simple and focus on creating content. I love it because I can unlock steady income with membership tiers and recurring support. I share exclusive content, behind-the-scenes moments, and early access just for my supporters. And there are no complicated setups or hidden fees for you or for me. For you listeners, you can show your love with a simple click and also get special perks, shout-outs, and bonus content in return. You want to support the show? Click the link in the show notes to support the show. And be sure to tell everyone that you love Petra's Dark and Dreamy. Keep sleeping soundly. Keep sleeping soundly. Don't let me wake you. It's Petra. I'm stopping by to tell you why I use Buy Me a Coffee to connect with my audience and grow my podcast. As a podcaster, Buy Me a Coffee has been a game changer for me. It's the easiest way for my listeners to support the show directly, whether through one-time donations or monthly memberships. The best part is that I get to keep it simple and focus on creating content. I love it because I can unlock steady income with membership tiers and recurring support. I share exclusive content, behind-the-scenes moments, and early access just for my supporters. And there are no complicated setups or hidden fees for you or for me. For you listeners, you can show your love with a simple click and also get special perks, shout-outs, and bonus content in return. You want to support the show? Click the link in the show notes to support the show. And be sure to tell everyone that you love Petra's Dark and Dreamy.